All right, welcome back. In this next segment, we're going to talk about using an index or multiple of them. And so creating an index is a really good technique when you need to improve the performance of your database query. When you're working with very large databases that have a whole plethora of records, has a lot of information and data in there, there are times when it's going to take a long time to return your results for the queries. So one way that you can increase the speed of that is by creating an index. And so when we do that, essentially we're making a copy of a selected field or multiple fields for our query that are already in ascending or descending order. So that when you run your query and you're trying to retrieve information from there, it's going to process much faster when you're searching or sorting, because now it's already in ascending or descending order, so searching through that is going to be much quicker. And so, you can kind of think of it in terms of a phone book, right? If, let's say a phone book, did you guys even remember what phone books are anymore? Let's say a phone book is essentially our database, and we have all these different records stored inside our phone book. Well, if our phone book was just in some random order, whichever way we entered in the record of there, right, not in alphabetical order, it would take a long time to look through there and retrieve specific information. But with the phone book being in alphabetical order, when we need to look for a particular record or for a particular person, it's very easy to do because we know it's in ascending order, and so we can just go straight to the section where we think it's going to be, right? If we're looking for the last name Johnson, we know that we're going to go to the J's, and it's going to make searching much quicker than if we had to look through the entire thing. So it's really beneficial, again, when you have very large databases. It significantly improves your query time by using an index. So kind of a caveat to having an index is that just having them requires processing resources to maintain them. And the reason why that is because our database, we want it to stay up to date, and so that includes any indexes that we might have. So if we change our table or a field or a record or whatever the case may be, we're going to need that index to update. So that's going to require some resources as well. All right, so when we're talking about indexes, we refer to either a single field index or a single column index, or we could have a multiple field or multiple column index. Now, the difference obviously being, the single column index is only using one field, right? Multiple is, just as its name implies, it's using multiple. But when you're trying to determine if you need to, or if you should create an index for your query, there's some relatively straightforward guidelines to help you out with that. Any field that has a key, essentially, or that is a key, I should say, should be indexed. A lot of database management systems, relational database management systems, will automatically create an index for the primary key fields inside of tables. You should also do it for any foreign keys as well. So in the case of multiple field or multiple column indexes, it mentions their composite keys. And we haven't really discussed what a composite key is. So let me kind of go over that really quickly. Because again, that is a type of key, so it would be helpful to have an index for. But what a composite key is, and you see on the screen there that it's listed under multiple column or multiple field index. And so unlike the primary key or foreign key, a composite key could essentially be either a primary or a foreign, but is still a composite. And all we mean by a composite key is that it just has multiple fields to make up the key, right? So for instance, let's say we had a table of employees, but we didn't have a field like employee ID, right? An employee ID would obviously be our primary key because it's very easy to have every record have a unique value. It's just their employee ID. But if we didn't have a field like that, we could create like a composite key that is the primary key, where we have where we distinguish unique fields by using both their first name field and their last name field, right? So separately, they may not create unique fields. They may not be useful primary keys because you could have two employees with the same first name or two employees with the same last name. But by using a composite key of the first name and last name, now you're using two fields, and that's what makes it a composite key. Now you probably will have a way of having unique records within that table. Not always. You still may have an employee that has first name and last name, and then maybe you want to use a middle name, right? But that's just an example of a composite key where you're using multiple fields instead of just a single field for a key. So that's what we mean by a composite key. So other than the fields that are keys, you should also, or you may also want to create an index for fields that you use frequently, that you search data frequently in, or that you sort data in frequently inside of your queries. Those are typically fields that you're going to want to create an index for because it's going to make that process faster when you're doing your queries. So when we're using SQL, when we're just writing SQL statements, right, if we are going to create an index, we're going to use the command create index, right? Surprise there, I know. And then we're going to give it a name. If we need to delete an index, we're going to use the drop index command. All right, so let's take a look at creating and deleting an index. So come up to create and query, switch it to SQL, just like always. And so again, to create an index, create index. And then you're going to provide it the name that you want to name the index. And so we'll say last name index. And so typically the the best practice is to set the name of the index to the field that you're running the index on. And so this is going to be a single field index. So I'm going to run it on the last name in employees. So I'm going to name it last name index. So create index, last name index on employees, and then we specify the field. Pretty straightforward. This is very similar to our shorthand notation, right, where we have the table name and then the fields inside the parentheses. So that should look familiar. And then we just simply run, and the index has been created. So we notice that this button kind of got highlighted, data definition, and so there are a lot of different data definition functions that some of them don't tend to work in Access, so you may run into that here and there, but this is not one of them. This one worked just fine. So now if we want to see that, we can open up the employees table. And if we change our field up here to, we got to put this in design view first, and then table design. Yep, and there it is right there. Our indexes. Indices? Indexes. All right, so I open it up, and there is the index that I just created. Last name index on the field last name. So we can also see that there is another index that's already there that I did not create. So I mentioned earlier that Access and a lot of other database management systems tend to automatically create an index for the primary key. So in this case, for employee, our primary key is employee ID, so it automatically created an index for that. So that's pretty great, I guess. So if we come down here in our field properties, we have this indexed field. And so in here we have 3 different options. We have no, yes, duplicates are okay, or yes, no duplicates. And so when we create a new field, it is by default not going to be indexed, so no would be selected. And then when we have a primary key field, we're going to say yes, it's indexed, and then duplicates are okay, is the next option, and then underneath it is yes, no duplicates. And so for a primary key, the yes, no duplicates is the default field for that. And so it just depends, for primary key, obviously we can't have duplicates. It needs to be a unique identifier, right, like employee ID. But there are other fields that we can index that may have duplicates, right, like last name that I just selected. So that would be an example where we would keep it to yes, duplicates are okay, because we might have employees that have the same last name. So those are our 3 options for that. So if we want to create an index with multiple fields, it would be very similar to how we did it in SQL, just like this, except I would provide multiple fields, right? Just like that. So another way that we can create indexes is in the design view here. So if under table design, if we come up to indexes, all I need to do is just fill in the fields here, give it a name, right, like employee salary index, and then select the fields that I want to give it. So we'll give it employee ID and salary. So we want, in this case, if we want to change the sort order from ascending to descending, all we need to do is select that. And so because we're not providing a separate index name, it's going to know that this is part of that and tied to that index. So that's pretty great. Pretty easy right there. And then if we want to remove an index, we'll save that. We just need to change create to drop, and then we don't need to specify the field. We just need to specify the index and the table that it's on. So then just run that, and now that index is gone. If I were to open up employees again, design view, indexes, that one I just created is now gone. So now I just have the employee salary and the auto-generated one. So, again, if I wanted to delete the other one, employee salary index, again, on employee. Oh, what did I do there? So as you can see, it's obviously not case sensitive because that still worked correctly. If I open up the employees table, design view, index, that one's gone. So there is creating and deleting both single field indexes and multiple field indexes. So that's pretty fun. And yeah, there's just a screenshot of that. I prefer to demonstrate and show you guys how to do it. I think it's more beneficial to you guys by doing that instead of just seeing a screenshot. So that wraps up using, creating, deleting, indexes. So I hope this was useful to you guys, and we'll see you in the next segment.